All right, let's get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rena Lachlan, and I'm the Senior Director of Programs and Advocacy at the Epilepsy Foundation, Eastern PA. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the sixth session of the Special Journey Solutions Navigating Key Options for Families with Special Needs webinar series. Tonight's topic is Filling the Buckets, Sources and Uses, Straight Talk on Money. As usual, you will hear from our wonderful financial planning experts, Susan Walter and Bruce Sham. Please place any questions you may have in the chat box, and our speakers will answer them. Welcome, Susan and Bruce. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rena. Welcome and good evening, all. Thank you for joining us tonight. I know summer is upon us and there are a lot of fun options to choose from. So we appreciate you spending time with us this evening. Supposedly there are storm warnings out, so if I lose power, I will also lose internet, but we'll figure that out if the weather turns. But right now it looks absolutely gorgeous outside. So fingers crossed everything goes well. In previous sessions, we first discussed broad overviews, topics ranging from wills, types of special needs trusts, powers of attorney, able accounts, government benefits such as SSI, SSDI, DAC, Medicaid, waivers, Medicare, even taxes. So as usual, I would like to open this session with some stories about money. We know money is important. We know it's kind of vital. Money can be an emotional topic. It can be a sensitive topic. It's personal. Money's often an awkward conversation topic. We can feel judged about money. Money might be shrouded in secrecy, ego, fear, perhaps. Our thoughts on money are shaped by family, culture, emotions, misconceptions, maybe nuance, our psychology and our relationship to it. I know someone who is happy and content if they have $50 in their checking account. And I also know someone else who gets anxious if their balance drops below 50 grand. Like I said, it's very, very personal. So one of the biggest questions for anyone discussing retirement, maybe you're looking out 30 years, maybe it's only 5 years away. Maybe you've already retired. It's whether there will be, and I'm going to put this in quotes, enough. We're living longer. Our kids are living longer. Social Security was not structured with our longer lived years as part of the model. And it's estimated that 84 trillion in wealth is going to be transferred in the next 20 years. So whether your piece of the pie is $5,000 or 50 million, when there's a special needs individual involved in the planning, different questions and considerations need to be asked, and fairness isn't necessarily equitable. So I recently worked with a newly divorced woman who absolutely knew how to budget, but she benefited from that kind of accelerated learning curve, trying to understand how these unknowns, these variables like time, mortality, retirement milestones, inflation, taxes, future healthcare needs, all of these things affect our ability to budget, right? And plan for uncertainty in the future. So we've worked with single parent households, families considering divorce, families who have planned, and families who have not planned, requiring some emergency decisions. And these are examples about how complicated life can be, especially when we want to ensure the best quality of life for our special needs individual. So we know there's no such thing as perfect. You'll never have all of the information available from, I wish we had fairy tale crystal balls where we could look in the future and know exactly what's coming and when, right? Timing. Life and plan, it's just dynamic. So there's also nothing that says one size fits all. It's unique to each family, each situation, each individual. The structure of the seminar tonight, we're going to do Q&A. I'm going to pull the cover page here in a second, and you'll just be looking at Bruce and I, or looking at Bruce and me. I'm going to post questions that we received. We've scrubbed them for personal information, but it's designed so that we can cover the basics in the topic, and then Bruce is going to answer. So we encourage you to put your questions into the chat. We'll watch that. I anticipate we have 30 to 40 minutes of questions and material that we've received, and I've written them out. But we always have time to answer your questions. So Bruce, while I pull this off, let me know if you have anything to add or say.
Yeah, I just that was a great list that you had brought up. I just thought of two other things that we hear about. Obviously market volatility, right? That's something in our fairy tale ball that we can't predict, right? And market volatility, right before we're ready to retire, during retirement, we're going to see it in our lifetime, right? And as you said, we are all living longer. So, a couple today in their 60s, there's an excellent chance that one of you are going to live into your mid 90s. So, we still have a long runway there, right? So market volatility. And the other thing, that again, we heard today, Susan, in meetings that we had were the waivers, like, yes, we somehow take a breath when we get these waivers, but all you ever hear is the waivers are being cut. There's not enough money. What if the budget cuts? Like, what if we what if we don't have it? Right. That's very, very critically important, right? When they shut down a lot of the sheltered workshops, right, during COVID, and then they never reopened and programs never restarted, these are some of the best laid plans that we have for our children. And now all of a sudden they're gone, right? I mean, obviously who would have ever predicted COVID, right? So those are the couple of additional things I was thinking while you were talking. So thank you for doing that.
Sure. Are you ready for the first question?
I am.
All right. It's a little broad, but what are the most common forms of income and savings, especially when we're thinking about the special needs adult?
Okay, so we talk a lot about this new ABLE account, right? Everybody's pretty excited about it. Didn't exist, even though it was put into law in 2014. We didn't start seeing them until around 2017. There's still a lot of states that don't have their own ABLE account. There's still a lot of question over, are they payback? Is it, how does it work? There's no beneficiary on it. So how is it not a payback? What I will say is that it grows tax-free. The money comes out tax-free. It's an opportunity for our loved ones with special needs who are working, who are making some money, to be able to save more than the $2,000. It always boggles my mind how over all these years of Social Security, that $2,000 resource limit has not changed. We've gotten increases in Social Security. Some years we didn't, many years we do. 2 years ago, we got an 8.9 increase in our benefit, but we couldn't save more than $2,000. And if we are trying to encourage and help our loved ones to get jobs, to be part of community, to be out in the community, $2,000 isn't cutting it. And so the ABLE account, allows us to save that extra money. Now, the government's not stupid. They have a cap. And even though you can put over $511,000 in an ABLE account, if you want to maintain your Social Security and your Medicaid, you can't have more than 100,000. So we have to be very mindful of that. And quite honestly, once I see around 85,000, I start getting a little gun shy, because with a couple of good markets, a couple of good market years, even if I'm not putting the 18,000 in, or my daughter's not putting the 18,000 in, I could hit the 100.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have to be very mindful of it. So in the absence of being able to save there is the first party trust. And we've talked a lot about it. People, people don't like it because it's a payback, but if you're getting an uncapped waiver or you're getting an $87,000 waiver and you're not really, I don't know. I think how do you argue with it, right? I mean, first of all, we're going to be very mindful of what goes in the first party trust. As long as planning has been done properly and there are third party trusts and the people who are contributing or who will be leaving money to our children know that there is a third party trust with a name, with a date, with a tax ID number, and they have their documents speak to our documents, we're not going to cause a problem. And you can have unlimited money in a third party trust. And then, as we know, that trust can then pass to our other children or other family. So, I mean, I do think that we are well positioned to be able to do better planning than we were in the past. As Susan said, money is one of those things that, we're always taught not to talk about. Don't ask about it. I'm laughing because my mother, who's going to be 92, finally called me twice this week and said, Bruce, I want to talk to you about money. And I was like, so tomorrow morning at 9:30, I'm going to talk to my 92-year-old mother about money. So, I mean, that's very, very interesting. She's very private about money. They grew up in the Depression. Her parents were World War II survivors. Very, very different mindset about money. So it should be very interesting. Other savings. A lot of times we've talked about what are good assets to leave our children. I mean, and I'm just using this as sort of a way to fall into the buckets of money. Insurance, life insurance is another bucket of money. It grows tax-free, comes out tax-free, benefits are tax-free. It's one of those few investments that are left that the government doesn't have their hand in right now. Yes, every few years, it's part of, negotiations and it's part of conversation in Washington. But we have really good lobbyists that continue to keep that tax-free. Just as an aside, for those of you who are concerned about estate taxes, knowing that in 2026, the estate tax limit, right now, we can pass over $23 million without any taxes, but it's going back down to 12, 13 million. Mm-hmm. Between insurance, retirement, some real estate, that is going to start to affect people. And it's 6 if you're an individual, if you're not married. It's only 12 if you're married. Right. So years ago, life insurance was used to pay estate taxes. People bought it to pay estate taxes with discounted dollars. We've been talking about using it to fund special needs trusts because it's a way to insure 2 lives. And even as Susan said, it can be a divorced couple who still have an insurable interest in their child. I've even had 2 brothers, 2 sisters, if a parent is deceased, right? And my brother is going to be the ultimate guardian of my daughter, then he has just as much of an insurable interest as I do. So if we're looking to create a bucket of money for the child to fund the trust, right? Because maybe there isn't a bucket of money right now, Susan, right? Often we are called in to create the bucket of money, right? So I think that's another bucket of money that we don't want to ignore. Right. Today we were talking with a family with significant retirement assets. And obviously they make too much money for a Roth IRA, but Roth money is much better to leave to our kids or much better to leave to a trust than traditional IRA money. We do have that caveat that if our child is deemed disabled, and as we know, a lot of our kids with epilepsy are not considered disabled, right? The epilepsy alone is not the disabling, right? Or right. Allowing our kids to qualify for benefits. I lost my train of thought there where I was going with this.
The Roth money.
Oh, so if we're making too much money, we're not eligible for Roth. We're doing Roth conversions, right? And we're doing like a backdoor Roth. And I think everybody would agree with me that income taxes are only going to go up, right? So do we bite the bullet and pay the tax today? Because remember, not only are taxes going to go up, but our growth is now going to grow, and that won't be taxed. Whereas if we leave it and wait, okay, the growth will ultimately be taxed when we do convert it or we do go to take it. So I think that's another very important bucket of money to think about, is if are we going to create some buckets of Roth IRA money, right, from our traditional IRA funds.
Well, here's a good segue into the next question.
Okay.
This is from the perspective of the parent of
Mhm.
a disabled adult child. If my savings, things like 401ks, IRAs, aren't necessarily enough for 3 retirements, what else do people consider? What else do people do? I think you touched on that.
I think I touched on it. You know, leveraging or really enhancing our children's Social Security benefit, I find more and more every day gaps in what people have done. Talked to a divorced woman yesterday. And it's always interesting. You always dance around lightly. You know, people are calling us, they're referred to us, they get our name from different programs, different organizations. And she's not saying any word about a spouse or partner. And I said, you know, is Lindsay, I'm not saying the name of the child, but is Lindsay's father in the picture? Oh no, he's a bum, but he's rich, he's loaded, and he's on some island somewhere with his girlfriend, right? Well, remember, like, he is still her father. And in the absence of planning, okay, there are still the laws of intestacy. And if there are assets, they are going to be distributed to the children. And so I said to her, I said, you know, what's his story? I mean, he worked in the United States. He built up a work rate. Oh, yeah, he was very successful. He was very successful. I said, well, and he's out on disability now. I said, have you contacted Social Security? You should know. Look, I think anybody who's divorced still has their ex-spouse's Social Security number from a tax return, right? If you were married at least 10 years, you're eligible for the benefit, but your child is always going to be eligible. So I said, have you talked to Social Security, given his Social Security number, to see if there are benefits that your daughter is eligible for? Well, let's roll the clock forward. And Susan, you're with me. How about 64,000 in back benefits that we were able to get, right?
Right.
I mean, nobody is looking at this. And I promise you that Social Security is not running after you and asking the questions and saying, oh, I spent all day looking to see that your wife died and your son should have been collecting her benefits 7 years ago. That's not happening.
No.
Right. So when you talk about, you know, just leveraging the Social Security, and we find more, like today I was with a 62-year-old who's married to a 51-year-old. She's the one making $250,000. He's making like $50,000. Well, he's going to retire. He'll get his Social Security. His son will now get an extra $500 a month. And eventually they're all going to benefit from the wife's Social Security. So, you know, we are trying to really find the way to fund that third retirement, right? And then with the extra money that the child will be getting, we're putting $500 into a second to die insurance policy to create 500,000, because there's going to be nothing left for the child when they both pass. Nothing. They will run out of money at 92. But this way, there's still money to put away. The wife will be able to work and get the higher amount. We left money for her to start contributing to her 401k because she has not been contributing. Again, we're trying to find the money, right, Susan? That's what you're asking, right? Where can we find the money? So, And another case I had today, I just said to the woman, and you're getting $943? No, I'm getting 600. I said, well, that's the first thing we're going to do. How come you're not charging your child for lodging expenses to get that extra $300 a month?
Mhm.
You know, $300 a month is real money, right? That's a utility bill, right? It's a car payment.
Mhm.
I,
That
I
that
don't
leads
think anybody should.
it
Go ahead.
leads exactly into my next question. How
Okay.
do I know if Social Security, or whether we're talking about SSI, whatever, but Social Security being the agency that
Right.
administers all this, how do I know if we're maximizing my child, my disabled person's benefits?
I mean, again, I have never seen anybody get a letter from Social Security saying, by the way, you left money on the table. You know, I tell parents all the time, if you are calling, you know, and again, you know, many of you on the call right now have worked with us and know that we do call for our clients. But most people, you know, they're getting ready to retire, they call. For those of you who have done it with me, you know it's the fourth or fifth question on the application. Do you have an adult child with a disability? But if you're doing it in person, they don't always ask. They don't always ask the question. They don't ask every single question. If you're not bringing it up, and you know, if you're doing it on the phone and they don't see or hear, you know, now things are really different now, right? I mean, we're not doing things in person as much as we used to, right? I mean, I've been doing this for over 46 years, and I remember being in people's homes and seeing that child run around and, you know, God, do they have attention deficit disorder? Are they on the spectrum? You know, like, you know what I mean? But now you don't see it. You do meetings during the day, the kids are at school. If you don't ask, that people are not volunteering the information. And so, you know, so how do you know? Unless you're asking Social Security, Susan, they're not going to volunteer it. Right?
So basically, you're saying you not only have to be proactive, you have to continually ask the question. You don't
And
say,
know the rules, because you know the mother this morning asked about the impaired related work expenses. Her daughter had been taking an Uber, and she wanted to know, you know, remember everybody, they deduct $1 for every $2 that our children earn. But if they are incurring expenses to get to work, or we as the parents are paying a job coach for our child to be safe, or paying a nurse for our child to be safe, because those things aren't being provided, you then have to submit those receipts to Social Security. That was one of the biggest things that I learned because, like I said, I didn't have any waiver services for 13 years. I was paying $64 a day for my daughter to make $28 a day. And when they were starting deducting the money from my daughter saying she was making too much money, I was like, she's not making any money. I'm paying for her to go to work, you know? And they said, well, Mr. Sham, you know, haven't you heard of impaired related work expenses? You know? So if you can't sleep at night, get the Red Book. It's 140 pages. It is not a good read, but you'll learn about impaired work related expenses. So I think that's really important, really important.
so this I found a meeting for the next question. You talked about charging lodging. So what can I do with the lodging payments that I receive from the child living in my home? It's necessary to charge it. What can I do with that money?
So, you know, there's a lot that you can do with it. Okay. And again, depending on your situation, there's plenty of individuals that literally take, you know, instead of just taking a lump sum, you know, just a lump sum. I remember in the very beginning, because again, you know, things have changed. Years ago, Social Security audited us every year. They looked at everything we did with that money. And I had to produce receipts. I didn't even take the money from Amanda. If my PICO bill was 150 and there were 3 of us in the house, she wrote a check for $50 to PICO. And I wrote a check for 100. I put 2 checks. I mean, nowadays, nobody even writes checks, right? Many of you have already sent everything electronically online. And yeah, you know, I printed out a stack of bank statements today I have a client, he's in London right now on the He's a famous actor, but is the primary caregiver for his disabled brother. And I literally printed out a stack of Citizens Bank statements because we had to show Social Security what happened with that money.
Mhm.
You know, he's in a continuing care community right now with over $9,000 a month. We're waiting to get him on home and community-based services. Okay. But he got knocked off of Medicaid because he had $465 too much in his account 1 month. That's how fast they knocked him off.
Mhm.
Okay. And so you really have to be careful, you know, but what can you do with the money? So years ago, like I said, that was a very clean way to show where the money went. Okay. After 2 years, people are not getting audited anymore. You might get a letter saying, you know, have you been in, it's interesting. It says, have you been in jail? You know, have you been, you know, they ask these questions. They also want to know if you've saved any of the money. And if you have, where did it go?
Mhm.
Now, I find it very difficult if you're only getting, you know, the $600 or the $900 a month that you're saving any. Remember, it can be used for clothing, personal grooming, vacations. If you're going on vacation, buy the plane ticket, right? You can use the money for any of these things. Okay. Or of course, you can put it in the ABLE account. I'm getting an echo. Are you hearing the echo or is it just me? It's just on my side.
You-
It's just on my side. Okay. As long as it's not offending anybody. You can use it for any accommodations that need to be made for the child, to purchase equipment, to purchase a new computer. Really, Susan, anything that enhances the life of the child. But Social Security wants to see that it's being used for lodging expenses and food, right? The Social Security should be used for that. And then money in the trust is supposed to supplement those expenses. Okay. That being said, if we are charging our children and you have the money, nobody's really looking that that's the dollar that went into this account, right? Or that's the dollar that went somewhere else. I just think you keep a record. You know, we have a nice little receipt that we prepare. You can just say paid every month. You can just, it's a Word document. You can show that this is where the money went, to the cell phone, to the internet, to the cable. But if you choose to use it for other things, nobody's really questioning that.
Right. So basically you're saying they're not auditing all of your records down to an accounting T table, but yeah.
Exactly. I mean, just like when people say, well, you know, I want to split my assets among my children. Okay. Well, you want to split the amount of money that each child gets, right? If there's, I don't know, 1.5 million to keep it simple, you want each child to get 500,000. But maybe my daughter's 500 is going to be the house that's going to be in a trust. And somebody else is going to get 500 of qualified IRA money, right? And somebody else is going to get 500,000 of combination of stocks and bonds, and right. It doesn't have to be 1/3 of the stocks and bonds, 1/3 of the house. And I think people get overwhelmed with that. Like, what's the best asset for our children? Right. Same thing with the money.
Yep, exactly. That's actually the next question on my list. Which assets are better if we're kind of looking at the top few that we generally talk about in planning?
Yep. Yep.
What's good for the ABLE? What's good for the first? What's good for the third?
So remember, the ABLE account can not only receive the 18,000, but it can receive an additional $14,500 if our children are working. And often, particularly with children that we meet from Epilepsy Foundation, maybe they're developing their seizure disorder later in life. They've had careers, they have some money, right? Maybe we are still working. Maybe we're not getting Medicaid at this point. Remember, you can have up to 511,000 in an ABLE account if we're not dependent at this point on the Social Security or the Medicaid, right?
Mhm.
So Obviously, that's a great place for us to put money that can grow tax-free, that can come out tax-free. I mean, that's a great account to be able to use. Very little restrictions on what the money can be used for. ABLE means the ability for a better life experience. That can be used for anything. The thing that you really can't use it for is to buy Father's Day presents. That's my line this week, fathers. You know, the kids can't use it to buy us presents, right? But they can buy a new computer. One girl just bought a new bedroom set, you know, stuff like that, right? She's getting a beautiful new program in the Carolinas. I'm so jealous. And so they're gonna buy furniture with the money. It's really quite lovely, right?
Yeah.
That you can do that. Remember, the first party trust, I said the other day, it's almost like the punishment for not having a third party trust, right? A first party trust is sort of the government's way. You know, think about it, years ago when kids were in like some of these programs, I refer to like the Mary Campbell Center, Margaret Mead, these, I don't want to call them institutions because they're not, but they are like residential, almost hospital-like, right? Facilities. There's the English House. I know we have families with children at the English House. And then Aunt Mary leaves $500,000 to the child. Okay. You know, she doesn't have any children. She doesn't know who to leave it to. So I'm going to leave it to my child in the English House. Well, you know, the English House costs $250,000, $300,000 a year. Okay. All those, that's going to stop. The waiver is going to stop. You're going to have to spend down the 400,000, right? And then you're going to have to apply for waiver again. And so what the first party trust has done, and again, the child has to be below the age of 65. What the first party trust has done is it allows that child not to have to spend it down, not to lose their benefits. But the government's like, there's a penny left in there. We're taking it all when you pass away. Okay. But had Aunt Mary known that the child's parents set up a third party trust and here's the name and the tax ID number, she could have just as easily left it to that third party trust. So if she left it to the third party trust, it could have stayed in the family. And that's just such a better way to position money, right? But again, everybody's situation is different. I got a call the other day from a family where the boy was putting money in a 401k. Some of these companies have mandatory 1% contributions for their employees. It counts towards the $2,000. Okay. Now, this kid had accumulated over 13,000. I mean, my daughter's been working 12 years. She only has 200 in her 401k because she doesn't contribute. And the 1% that Giant puts away for her, it's a couple $100 a year. It's nothing, right? It does count. But remember, you can't always take these accounts out until you're 59 and a half. So the government caught up. He's now at 13,000. He's losing his benefits. This is a real problem. This is a real problem. Okay. First, I told them that they need to stop contributing to it. Okay. Some 401ks allow you to take a loan. Okay. This one is allowing us to take a hardship withdrawal.
Okay.
And that's how we're getting it spent down. Yes, he's going to have to pay tax on it. He's going to have to pay tax on the whole thing. But that's a small price to pay to be able to protect his other benefits, which he needs tremendously. You know, the jobs that our kids have do not provide them with health insurance. And in this case, the mother was 71 years old. She's the one that's estranged from her husband, and he needs the health insurance. Right? He needs the health insurance. So, you know, I think that addresses the three main buckets of money for our kids that, you know, the government has made available for us.
So I can speak to our own planning. My My life policy is sitting in Henry's third-party trust. So it'll be funded at my demise. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
somebody is getting an echo. I just don't know how to stop it.
Well,
I'm not hearing it anymore.
I'm
I
not
think
either.
if you guys, if you're not talking, you just go on mute. That does help.
Susan and myself,
Yeah,
or
so if
or
you're
the
not talking, you
participants.
can just, no, it's the panelists, it's us.
Okay, okay. I'll go on mute until I'm talking again.
Okay. All right. So the next question is in the realm of taxes. Everyone talks about taxes, but no one really knows the future other than we think they're going to go up. How do plans address future taxes? I'll go on mute. You're on mute.
I will unmute. I said to the gentleman today, because we were trying to rebalance his account, right? Because now that he's older and he's like 98% in stocks. I mean, very, very aggressive. But in a non-qualified account, he's going to incur capital gains, right? So, he says, how can I avoid this, Bruce? I said, well, if you die, there's a step up in basis, right? I said, so all you have to do is die, and that'll solve the problem. We talked earlier about paying the taxes now, doing some of these Roth conversions. Sometimes it doesn't make sense though. If we don't have that runway, it's kind of hard to take a $40,000-$60,000 tax bite, if we're gonna pay taxes. Remember, by taking $200,000-$300,000 more, you add that to your current income, you're now in a 30-35% tax bracket. A lot of people think, oh, well, I'm in a 20% bracket, a 12% bracket, it's not going to make a big difference, but that all gets added into your income. So it is a little bit of a challenge. Now, a lot of families that we meet, they are not taking the full distributions from their retirement account. Okay. Maybe they don't need it right now. Of course, at certain ages, obviously you're required to take money, but many of the accounts you could take more, you could accelerate what you're taking, and using that to create tax-free money, using that money to create, like you said, an insurance policy that will fund the trust for our children that will come in tax-free is a very interesting concept of doing that, taking the money, paying the tax on that smaller amount, right? And buying something tax-free that will come in tax-free and replace that asset. So, I don't know that there's any magic answer. People say to me about like the trusts themselves, well, a trust is taxed at the highest tax rate. Well, trusts can be invested in municipals. You can be in tax-free type vehicles, right? Like you can have millions of dollars in a trust in tax freeze, right? Years ago, well, not many years ago, a few years ago, money in money market are nothing. Right now, you had money in the money market last year, you did really well, right? You had guaranteed over 5% in a money market. It's just kind of a anomaly of a year. But I think looking at how the funds are invested, but to say that, there's one magic way to avoid taxes. Now, there's tax deferral, right? There are ways to defer taxes, right? We have money that is currently taxable. We have money that's going to be taxed in the future, money that's like I said, tax deferred, money that's tax free. Like we do look at the different buckets of money, particularly when we're trying to create some money to, because we have a life event that we need to satisfy or take action on. And so we're always looking, okay, where is the best place to take this money from? What's going to have the lowest impact? Okay. And, I'll bring up one other thing that, we didn't talk about at all. If somebody, I know that a few people on the call, they do only have one child. So I want this to be meaningful, but this wouldn't be. we had a family yesterday where they had three children and over 300,000 in a regular 529 college fund for the one child. And, fortunately there you can move that to other children, right? You can move it to other children. You can give it to nieces or nephews. I said to the woman, if she goes back to get a doctorate, she can use it for herself. You can use that money for yourself. So we're always trying to look at what's the best way, what's the best dollar to use, what's the best value. But I don't know, Susan, if there's, if I open up the IRS code, it's gonna jump out and say that that's the best thing to do, right?
No, exactly. I think it's more about holistic planning and taking a look at the goals and the individual needs, all the people that are involved. Yeah, like I said before, there is no one size fits all. We kind of already talked about two of these questions, tax deferred assets and any asset classes that kind of tend to avoid taxes, but maybe it's better if we say, what are the upcoming tax law changes? 2026 is right around the corner.
Right around the corner, one of my favorite topics. But to your point about tax deferred annuities, and annuities always got a bad rap because people didn't understand them. They were being sold incorrectly. They were being sold to young people. They were being sold to people who, as a retirement vehicle. A lot of people don't realize that your retirement accounts, and I know that many of our young people don't have traditional retirement accounts like we had, but many of us who are on the call today do have regular retirement accounts. And we have the option when we retire to, how are we going to take that money, right? Am I going to take it in a lump sum? Am I going to take a life only option? Well, what does that mean? That means it's going to be an annuity. They are calculating my life expectancy and saying, okay, we're going to gamble here. We're going to pay you this amount of money per month. We think you're going to die and we're going to keep the money, right? But maybe I'll outbeat them, right? I was saying to somebody yesterday, my wife's a school teacher, I would have to earn 8% guaranteed every day to have done better than what the Pennsylvania State Employee Retirement System is paying us. And you know what? I am a financial advisor, and I don't know where I could get 8% guaranteed every day. And I'm younger than my wife, right? So, we need that money to come in, right? So annuities, again, just to clarify, when you have a traditional retirement account, you are getting an annuity, right? So does my wife take a little less? So it does a joint and life survivor. The individual that referred this family to us was like, Bruce, they didn't tell the family all the truth about the annuity. They told them about 3 options. There are 7 options if you are a Pennsylvania state teacher. And a lot of this applies to our federal workers and our state workers, right? If you're part of the FERS program, federal employee retirement, or SERS, the state employee retirement, you really have to understand those benefits. But annuities that grow tax-free, how you get the money out, how it passes to others, that, we really did not talk a lot about that. Now, are they the best thing to leave our children? Not really. Okay. There are a couple of annuity companies. Remember, an annuity has to be based on a person. And if we're trying to put it in a trust isn't really a person, right? A trust doesn't have an actuarial life, right? There are a couple of companies right now, Lincoln Financial will actually work and allow us to put annuities into their particular product in a special needs trust. So again, we spend our time researching these products to see who will work with families like ours, who's going to have the best vehicle for families like ours. But the upcoming tax law change, this 2026, big, even for ABLE accounts. We were recently asked to speak to the Brain Injury Institute. And so we're dealing with athletes and professionals who are suffering from traumatic brain injuries much later in life. Well, for those of you who have recently, taken on ABLE accounts, you know that in order to have an ABLE account, the disability had to have occurred before the age of 26. Well, in Pennsylvania, they have already agreed that it's changing to 46. So that will cover a lot of individuals who in their 20s and 30s in college who played lacrosse, played hockey, right? And we all know that the career lifespan of most athletes, yes, there's the exception, right? For those of you Patriots, right? There is the exception, the Tom Brady's of the world, right? But I think the career, is usually in the 20s and 30s where you're making your highest income. Well, if they raise it to 46, that's going to open up a huge opportunity for people, right? With disabilities. I already talked about the estate tax change because that's something that, it is of particular interest to me. And obviously in my professional life, that affects many of our clients, right? It is going to be a game changer. We were not doing irrevocable life insurance trusts and transferring assets into trusts for years, because unless you had 23 million, you didn't need to, right? But I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the marital deduction was 250,000. And then it went to 500,000. It went to 600. It went to $1 million. It went to 3.5, right? It went to 5.4. And then to 23 million. I mean, it's just insane, right? Like that was sort of like, okay, we never talked about crummy powers and letters and, transferring assets and gifting assets. And we haven't talked about it, but guess what? It's back. It is back with all the wealth that Susan just talked about that's being transferred. It is back. And, looking at, for our kids, if we're inheriting money from our parents, a lot of our parents and grandparents, our children weren't born yet when they set these trusts up. They didn't know that I had a child with a disability. And so if all the players are still alive right now, you can go in and change the document, right? If all the individuals are, you can change it. You're looking to have like a power of appointment that now I don't leave it outright to my child, that my daughter's share will go into her third-party trust. So, these are all very interesting things that are coming. Some are already here, right? Some aren't changing, right? Some aren't changing. They've always been here. But, we look at what's the best way to embrace. I don't want to say attack because it's coming, right? Like, so we might as well, embrace it, right? We might as well embrace it and make the best of it, right? And come up with the best outcome for how this is going to pass. But, for those of us who don't like to talk about money and don't think like I can't wait to meet my mom tomorrow. And I'm exaggerating a little bit. I mean, I know quite a bit, but she's very, very private, very, very private about money. And, she is having her 92nd birthday, but she's still driving. She's the designated driver of all of her friends at Aunt's Choice. It just cracks me up. And I'm like, Mom, you really should not be driving at night. Well, during the day, she's okay. She just passed that other test that you have to take. There was a test that she just had to take. All right. So Susan,
Okay.
did I answer that?
I think so. I think the last sort of categories that were on my list, really, I guess what
I like
bothers
the last question. I'm a good saver, but how do I know it'll be enough?
Yeah, how do I know if it's going to be enough? Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yep.
So, and again, we do modeling, there's so many good financial instruments out there that can do this type of modeling, but, we're fooling ourselves if we just run retirement models showing a 6% growth and never show 3 or 4 years of market decline. Right? I mean, we're fooling ourselves. We're saying, oh, well, if I get 6%, I'll never run out of money. Everything will be fine. Just plug in 1 or 2, 15, 20% declines. We've seen it. We saw it go down 49% at one time in our lifetimes. Okay. Just put that in there once and see what happens. Okay. People who have significant assets and those assets erode, and we are paying $250,000 a year for care, round the clock nursing care for our kids. We haven't been able to qualify for waiver. We haven't been able to get services. I have families who are concerned with $12 million. They are concerned, okay, about running out of money. And this is where you've got to look at, okay, you're not spending all the income that the asset is creating, and maybe you using that income to buy insurance for the future that will come in tax-free. That's not going to be part of your taxable estate because it'll be owned in an irrevocable trust. It'll be owned outside of the estate. This is what people with wealth and with means are going to be doing. And again, you know, for us, because the one guy said to me the other day, you know, like, when does it become enough? Like, so if my kids have to pay 4 million of taxes and they're getting 15 million, I mean, isn't it enough? Do I need to make sure that, you know, they get the full 19 million? You know, again, it's a very personal, I think Susan started out, it's a very personal decision. If this is wealth that has come down from my great-grandfather, you know, if this is wealth that's coming, you know, remember also, wealth can come in the form of real estate and not be liquid. Taxes still have to be paid within 9 months of death. These shore homes that our parents bought for 25,000 that are now worth 25 million. I'm serious. I know somebody that has one, right? I mean, that's where I'm going to have to pay their tax. The client's going to have to pay the tax within 9 months of death. Where are they getting the money to pay the tax? And the documents read the house is not supposed to be sold. Where are they getting the money to pay the taxes? So I think it's a very valid question, Susan. Very valid.
So we talk about federal estate taxes, but there's also Pennsylvania. So it's not like it's a one and done, but there are two.
Yeah, you just move to Florida, or you move to Delaware, or you move to one of those states that don't have it. South Carolina, right? Like, you just move to one of those states but make sure you're there for at least 6 months out of the year. You know?
One last question. This is coming out of the blue. What about that third party special needs trust owning the house, the condo, the whatever for the disabled person? How do you make that choice whether to title the house to the special needs trust?
So we do talk about it a lot. And remember, often the house may be one of the larger assets that the family has. And if the parents are really depending on that house for their next stage of life, for wherever they're going, you transfer it to an irrevocable trust. I mean, that's why it's irrevocable. It's irrevocable, right? You can't just say, "Whoops, I made a mistake. I need it back," right? Obviously, if you have a trustee, you know, who's willing to, you know, but again, that's not really the point, right? Like, we like to see the house in the trust because, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate here. Many families say, I'm leaving the house to my child. This is the house they grew up in. This is where they're staying. And, you know, I'm sorry. Our kids are not going to be able to manage it. You know, they're not, when the roof leaks, they're not going to be able to call a roofer. They're not going to be able to call a plumber. They're not going to be able to deal with the lawn. And then when the lawnmower breaks, you know, who's going to do it, right? Often the house is not the best asset. So if you leave them the house out of the trust and then it gets sold, well, that becomes an available resource. Okay. But if you put the house in the trust, I think it really is the timing of when this is being done, right? Or also how the assets, like I said, are distributed. You don't have to leave half of the house, a third of the house to your child, right? If we're looking to equalize how much money goes to all of our children, And again, I know there are couples on the phone right now with one child only, so this doesn't really apply. I suspect that it will be sold, or maybe it'll become a rental property. Maybe it will be part of the revenue, the income that will come in for your child, okay? And have it set up properly and have a property manager managing it. In that respect, that's a very interesting model and could very well be in the trust, right? But as an income producing asset, right, in the trust.
Mhm.
But we are allowed to have one home and one car, an individual with special needs.
Right.
So, I really think it depends. The other thing I'm going to say is, like, again, just going back to my mom with her condo, she thought it would be great to leave that to my daughter. Okay. So let's not even talk about the fact that it needed to go in a first party trust, but let's just say everything was done properly. And there was no mortgage on it. Her condo fees were more than my daughter's rent. It was not doing us any favor whatsoever. And the condo fees, the association fees, they keep going up. And again, my daughter right now, with her limited intellectual capacity, can walk to the maintenance office and say, my dishwasher is not working. My refrigerator is not working. And they will replace it.
Mhm.
Okay. If in the condo, she's responsible for the contents. And I said to my mom, I said, Mom, it's not a good asset. I know you mean well, but it's not a good asset for my daughter. Okay. Look, but and it kills me every time her rent goes up. I start screaming at the place. I said, my daughter's on a fixed income. I said, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Exactly. The age-old question. What are we going to do?
What are we going to do? We
Well,
just have to have a plan, right?
yes,
The best plan that we can make.
it's coming up 8 o'clock. I want to double check that there are no questions. I don't think so. I'm
I don't
looking.
see any in the chat. I don't know if anybody has something that they want to ask.
That's all right. Money is one of those subjects.
Yeah, this was a tough one,
Yeah.
but hopefully it'll create some thinking. Thank you, John. Hopefully it'll create some thinking amongst the participants. And
Yes.
thank you, Rena, for having us and continuing to have us. I hope everybody's been enjoying this.
Thank you both so much for that really informative session. And thank you for those that joined us this evening. Just a reminder, our next session will be September 5th, and the topic is difficult conversations and decisions. I hope everyone has a wonderful summer, and we will see you in September.
In September.
Thanks,
Good
Susan.
night.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Good night.
Rena.
Have a nice
Bye-bye.
evening.